I didn't expect
Oh,
him
there
to
we go.
disappear.
That's so funny. It
Yeah,
said you were alive, and then it was like a second difference. It's like that Australian to Cleveland, Ohio, USA thing. Hey, this is the Expo live stream. Welcome. We're letting folks file in here. We are on the second episode in our styling series. A few weeks ago, we talked about the built-in styling, and now we're talking with Mark Lawlor, Expo team member and NativeWind maintainer, about, of course, NativeWind. How's it going, Mark?
yeah, pretty good. It's I'm from Australia. If you can't tell by the accent, it's a nice warm morning down here. It's the middle of our winter, and it's about 31 degrees Celsius. I think that's
Dang,
about 90 Fahrenheit right now for a winter day. So
that's
pretty fun
bonkers
day.
because I'm in Ohio, and it's also like 90 degrees here, and it's summer.
Yeah.
So that is weird. Does it ever get cold around you? Like, or is it like pretty mild?
It does get cold. But like our winter when it gets below what what is Celsius in Fahrenheit? I always forget to get them too confused.
All
It's
I
about
know is like
32.
20
When it gets down to
Celsius is
about
like 70. Yeah.
yeah. Oh no, so 10 Celsius is about 50 Fahrenheit. So when it gets around there, I start getting quite cold.
That's
I
pretty
say when it
freaking
drops to
warm for
single
me.
digits. Yeah.
So, hey, as you're filing in, we'd like to see how global the React Native community is. So, let us know where you're from. We've got Ohio and Australia on the call. We've got Liz from stormy Sarasota, Florida, and 90-ish here as well. So it's 90 in Ohio, it's 90 in Florida, it's 90 in Australia. Is it just 90 everywhere? I guess this is global warming for you. Dominican Republic, Soriami, thank you. Portugal, Nuno from Portugal, Joel from Brazil, William from Ghana. We just like cover the whole freaking globe in like 3 seconds. Sam from Los Angeles, Shine in Texas, Carlos from Bolivia, hello in Sweden. Thank you everyone for joining. Jacob from Sweden. I can't keep up with this. Like, we
No,
got people
there's too
everywhere.
many.
Yeah, we'll get started here in about a minute as we're just letting folks file. Of course, we're talking about styling in general lately, and we're talking about NativeWind with Mark today. We've got Zach from Canada, Erwing from Brazil, Mahu from Turkey, Anne from Sweden, Mohajid from Morocco, Leo from Denver. We've got Bangladesh on the board. We're touching them all today. Poland. Hey, I know that guy. C-Mac. How you doing? Brazil, USA. Yeah, I'm excited about NativeWind too. And we'll get started here in about 15 seconds. Any words of pre I don't even know. What's your last words before your first words?
Last words for first words. Let's do this, right? That's always like the famous last words, and also your first words.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right, we'll get going here. For everyone who's just joining now, of course, this is the Expo live stream. We're talking with Mark Lawlor, maintainer of NativeWind. And we're talking about NativeWind, the second in our styling series. And thank you all for joining. And of course, this series, we are talking all about styling in React Native. And so we've talked a few weeks ago about the built-in styling. We're talking about NativeWind. This week with Mark, we're talking about Tamagui. Next week, I believe. So we're just learning about what are the different options for styling and why you might want to choose one, or which one might be best for you. We just want to lay out the what's going on, and let you guys decide, because there's lots of great choices. So, um, Mark, what is NativeWind?
yeah, it's
Good
always
question.
a very good question. NativeWind is quite a complex library in everything that it does, and it does a lot to achieve, but it does have like a pretty basic elevator pitch, in that combines the benefits of Tailwind CSS with the styling capabilities of React Native. And so Tailwind CSS has kind of revolutionized the web in its approach to styling. It allows for a very design centric very quick, iterable way that you can actually design your components in a way that's kind of also library agnostic. So it allows you to keep your like design system separated from your actual components itself. We don't really have anything like that in React Native land. So NativeWind has attempted to bring that philosophy into React Native so that you can have it across all your platforms. So the web just shouldn't have this goodness. We should have this across iOS, Android, Windows, Mac OS X, Apple TV. We should be having this fast iterative approach everywhere we kind of develop. And so the other point about NativeWind then is, can we make styling consistent? So not only can we bring across this philosophy, can we also bring across some of the concepts from the web and that have made styling there so impactful and bring them into React Native? Because React Native was originally came from React, and React was originally based upon the web. So it's kind of good to maybe catch it up to modern times, because React Native kind of forked off from React and kind of stood still with its styling options, and nothing's really changed there. So the other point of NativeWind is, can we modernize React Native? Can we bring a lot of modern concepts in and to make our lives a little bit easier, reduce how much boilerplate we do, and basically just give us more powerful styling options?
Nice. How did you get into maintaining this? What's your
Uh,
story
yeah.
here?
So it's actually quite a long, convoluted story of how I got here. Because you never really set off to make the thing that you end up making. Um, there was actually app.js that gave me the original inspiration for this. Way back in the day, Fernando was doing a talk about how he was making cross-compatible React apps. And with his company BeatGeek, he's got a couple of talks now at app.js. People should kind of check them out on YouTube after this. But he was talking about styling and how he was trying to make styling work across the two. And at this stage, we hadn't quite worked out how we can get styling for React Native web working properly. So what was happening is the web had moved away from client-side rendering and moved to server-side rendering, which required an actual CSS file. So people were actually looking at, how do I compile React Native to CSS? And I kind of like joined this effort because it seemed like a pretty fun challenge to do. But about after a couple of weeks of working on this, I started the question, like, why are we compiling to CSS? Like, CSS is already a standard, it's already a valid format. Why don't we do the reverse? Why don't we actually say the CSS is the source of truth and compile that back to React Native?
Huh.
And yeah, so I ran with this idea. I found a couple of projects that had already attempted this idea before, but I took it to an extreme that no one else had taken to, and from that, NativeWind was eventually born. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a great summary of that. So before I know you're gonna head into a code demo in just a moment, and as we mentioned in the chat, feel free to start firing off NativeWind questions. We'll be highlighting a few of them as we go on. Before, during, and after Mark's demo. But to kind of like summarize like the pitch of like who, besides everyone, who might be best suited by NativeWind. Like to me, it sounds like someone who really values like cross compatibility with like a Tailwind, web code base. Not just cross compatibility in terms of code, but also just like in terms of like ideas and like syntax and how you do these things. Maybe that's a little bit reductive. I don't know if that's a good summary, or is there like a general person that would really value the features of NativeWind?
Well, yeah, it's actually very interesting because on one hand, I'll get into that. NativeWind is perfectly suited for the web crowd. It takes in those concepts you already know, but it actually turns out that there's actually this other crowd where NativeWind is perfect for React Native developers as well. So because no one had really explored this space before, we actually found out that NativeWind actually solves a lot of problems with React Native that we didn't really kind of think, or we knew that they were there. Sometimes when you keep doing something one way, that just becomes the normal. And then it's not until someone shows you a different way that you actually realize that, there's problems with your existing workflow. Things are a lot harder than it's meant to be. So I think the success of NativeWind is because it's managed to tap many different audiences. There's not just this one group of people that would benefit from it. A lot of people benefit for other different reasons. So, for example, or there's the obvious of we already have a web application and we're moving into native, or we're familiar with these concepts, and we don't want to have to learn a new styling library. Like, yep, that's the cool one. That's great. Glad you guys like it. But the more people the actual crowd I think about it is better is for the actual React Native folks who've never even touched web before, because React Native is very hands-on with its styling. It's very easy to make like the text red or the background color a certain color, but styling is inherently stateful. Like when you press on something, you have to then listen to the callback to fire a state update to change the color of something. And already that's like 10 lines of boilerplate just to do a pressable that changes color. But the styling has lots of states. You've got presses, hovers, focus, the color scheme, the theme of your application, the user styling, and all of these things kind of compound on top of each other, and to the point where it just gets incredibly complex. And that's why React Native hasn't got this one central way that we like to do styling. There's lots of different fragmented groups because it's such a complex problem that we haven't found like one good solution for it. And so NativeWind kind of hits that crowd, the people who are unhappy with the CSS and JS, who thought it was too verbose, too fragile, it's too hard to deal with multiple variants. It presents us in a very easy way. And even better, because it is built off Tailwind, and Tailwind has a massive community. There are so many YouTube videos, so many helper utility libraries, that as soon as you have a problem or how to, it's very easy to Google a solution because of just the sheer size of the community there. So it kind
Nice.
of works well for that perspective as well.
Yeah, and I can actually vouch for that. I dove into NativeWind earlier this year, having no experience with really anything other than base styling. And Mark and I kind of talked about this before, where it's like a little bit slow going because you're like, well, I don't really familiar with these properties. But then like a little bit in, you suddenly feel this big ramp up because there's like things you're not defining in state anymore. You're no longer, you're just putting these little concise things in there, and suddenly your app is much better styled with a lot less code. So, of course, it's one thing for us to talk about it, but you're about to show it to us. So we'll let you get into your demo here as you're showing us the fundamentals of NativeWind.
Yeah, well, I might actually just talk about NativeWind a little bit more just before
Sure.
I go into the demos, just to kind of position the value proposition for it a little bit and just kind of express how it works a little bit differently. Actually, no, sorry. I'll go into the demo first, and let's just see how things look, and then we'll talk about how it works a little bit more, because I'm sure people have questions. All right, so let's just share my screen.
And once again, folks, if you have questions about NativeWind, we'll be getting to your questions. So feel free to fire with those in the chat, and we'll be sure to highlight a few.
All right, am I on the screen there at the moment?
Yeah, looking good here.
Okay, cool. Okay, so at the moment, I've got like a really basic application, and you can see that it's basically your Netflix clone. It's running inside a browser and on the iOS simulator as well. And the styling is it's okay. You can see that it's clearly like an in progress project. And what we're going to do is we're just going to add some styles and kind of play around with different things, just to kind of show you how they work and how they can change. And so let's just go on to like something first, and we'll kind of talk about things a little bit. You can see that the headers of these sections, they're very small, they're not very good, they're not very styled. So let's kind of change how they work. And all these headers come from this section link. And if I go to it, it's just a link component. So one of the things about NativeWind that makes it really useful is you don't actually have to declare your styles. So Tailwind CSS is a declarative styling library, which means you simply write your class names, and then an external compiler picks up those class names and turns them into your CSS stylings. And so there's actually a set of predefined styles that you can use for your components. So if you simply just do something like text LG and run that, the text becomes bigger. Or if I do something like font bold, the font then becomes bold. And you can see that you can get a telesense inside your editor that actually helps you tell and see all the classes that they could be. So this isn't something that NativeWind has done. This is an example of how NativeWind can take advantage of the huge Tailwind ecosystem, because this is just simply using the Tailwind CSS VS Code extension to get this IntelliSense. But these classes, they not only define the rules, but they define the design system for your application. Because styling isn't about making things a certain color or a certain things. They're also about coming up with these design tokens that add consistency to your application. So here, instead of saying, I want the text to be like this explicit font size, which you can do if you want to, but you instead say, I want it to be text LG. LG stands for large, and this is coming from a theme that I'll be going into a little bit soon that you can customize, and this gives you your design tokens. Tailwind is based upon the concept of atomic design, which is that you should always have simply one class name for one certain style. It's actually really similar to how we often style in React Native, where we'd say like style sheet.create is one certain thing. So we'd say like text LG, and then you'd say like the font size here. And you might have something else like brand color. Brand, and then like, or just like color brand. Brand, font size spell with your color. And so on our component, we would then do something like text style, and then we would compose these together. We'd say like styles, and then like text LG. And then inside the same array, we would then have our second styles here. And you'd have these small styles that are very atomic and allow you to slowly build up what you want it to be. And this has been shown over time, especially in larger applications. So we're talking about like your big enterprise applications, that atomic design actually helps with the maintainability of these larger projects. When everything is granular on a styling level, it's very easy to find out where problems are and where to fix them without changing or having big dramatic effects on everything else. It also has a strange side effect of making the end bundle smaller because, well, there's a lot of reuse and styles happening here. So,
yeah,
sorry.
Oh, I would say one thing that appealed to me out of the box was often I get a little bit stressed thinking about like, well, like I know enough to know that I should have a small, a medium, a large font, or like whatever these different tokens are. But I don't want to like, if I'm prototyping something, I don't want to define them right away. So it was kind of nice to me coming in fresh to be like, oh, there's already a default definition. I can override it when I actually care about that, but I don't have to worry about everything having like zero spacing, the default, really tiny font size out of the box. I can just start thinking about things relative to each other instead of absolute numbers.
Exactly. And the other advantage of this is that you can just simply start typing. You don't have to, like you saw me writing the styles before. I was kind of like screwing up, didn't spell stuff properly, had to think about the punctuation, putting in curly brackets, commas. Often when you're styling, you just kind of want to like mind dump what you want. You just want to be like, okay, cool. I need this to be underlined. I need this to be text red, like 500. Like you just want to start like laying down the styles that you want it to be. But then the best part about this as well is it's very easy to search for where certain styles are being applied. So the other part about atomic parts is I can just open up my search and be like text LG and find everywhere where this text is being used. You're not coming up with new names for things, which is a very key point. Because when you're using like styles and you're using stylesheet.create, I have to come up with new class names or new identifiers for all those styles. And what happens is everyone starts creating your classic, let's have like styles.root. or styles.wrapper and styles.container. And then suddenly you've got the same name, you like 10 different things, and your design system starts feeling a little bit shaky and hard to work with and hard to make changes and identify what stuff are. So the class name kind of fixes that because you don't have to think about naming anymore. You've just got to think, I want this, and you write it on the page, and then it appears straight away for you. It kind of takes that mental burden off you for a little bit
Very
as well.
nice. All about that. I have enough things to worry about as a developer.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so you can see here that I'm making changes, and these changes are being applied inside my editor and inside my simulator straight away. The simulator's a little bit slower. You just gotta give it a moment, but it does work. And so let's go into some of the more advantages, because this is kind of obvious, right? It's not hard to make things bold, text, red. Let's try and make this a little bit more complicated. So let's go back to underline. That's a good one here. But maybe I don't want this to be underlined all the time. For example, on the web, it's pretty common to only underline something when it's being hovered. And so Tailwind has this concept called a modifier, where you could have a class, but you can place a modifier at the front of it. And this now changes the functionality of how it works. It's some sort of conditional statement. And so for hover, that's clearly just whenever I hover over something, the underline appears. But on mobile, well, there is no hover. I'm using a pointer. We don't have a hover event for that. So there is no underline here. But how does this work? Because this is stateful. It kind of makes sense that this works on the web. But how do we get some more stateful stuff happening on mobile as well? Let's get something else like active. So active is the keyword, if you're familiar with CSS, of not when I hover on something, but when I press down with my mouse, I now get that underline effect. And that makes sense for the web, but we can now do that on mobile because we have press events, which are very similar to click events. So now when I press on inside this text appears. And this is the subtlety of NativeWind, and when you can start to see how powerful it can be. Because this link, it doesn't have an on-click handler. If I was going to do this with normal styling, I'd have to say like set pressed, or is pressed. Then go like use state, do this whole thing, set up like an on press event to say that on press actually set it this, then when it's released. There's a lot of boilerplate that I'd have to write, have to deal with, have to make sure that these callbacks are properly memorized, and that they're not re-rendering the component. But suddenly all that complexity is taken away just because I wrote 7 characters in front of a class. NativeWind jumps in and is like, I know what you want to do. I can make this happen. I can set up these event handlers for you, the correct React hooks, the correct state management, and we can actually make this a stateful styled component. And so we can take this a little bit further now. Like this is kind of like the most basic kind of stateful styling that we can do. So let's go a little bit more advanced. I'm going to go into my layout here. And at the moment, you guys, if you look at the bottom of the screen, we're actually using a new tabs component in Expo Router. This is a bit of a sneak peek of things to come. See, NativeWind works really well when you have unstyled components. When you're going from scratch and building up and saying, I want to make this view into this thing I want. And you can customize it as much as you want it to be. And so these new tabs that are present coming in Expo Router, they're unstyled, they're headless tabs. And this means that you can change it however you want. You're no longer constrained by like the tabs that came with React Navigation. And that's really good because we want to change things up a little bit, because these tabs work really well on mobile. But when I get onto desktop, I've got a pretty big screen here. Those work well. But when I start getting really big, these tabs, they're not going to cut it on a wide screen. I need to do something different now with my styling that's per platform and also per the dimensions of that screen. And so we can now use these modifiers to customize these a little bit as well. So to customize this, I can simply just put my class name on my tabs, and let's do something different. So normally we do like flex row. or flex. They're flex col at the moment. But if I save this, nothing changes. But if I change it to row, we'll see that everything gets, well, we probably want row reverse actually, gets moved around. But we only want to do this on one platform. So we can add like a web modifier to say, only apply this styling while you're on the web. And there we go. Now iOS is unaffected and only web has our sidebar here. But it's not really good at the moment. We've gone from, we need to change things up a little bit. Like we've got our tabs, they're still going in a row here. We need to change them to a column as well. So let's go into here. We can go into flex col, where we just want it on our web. And maybe we can change their positioning as well. So we can actually move them up. And so now I've got, it's the same component. I'm still rendering out this tabs view, but our styling system is powerful enough to be like, okay, let's change things up per platform. And I've got now my sidebar on the web.
So it looks like you're getting pretty close to some of the questions that we have in the chat here about media queries and screen breakpoints.
I'm just about to cover that now because
nice.
we don't want to have that side tabs. We want to, when we get back, because the web still has mobile, you can still open up a web browser and go to it on your phone. So we need to now actually put breakpoints in for the web. And so we could do that by simply using the breakpoint modifiers. So in Tailwind, these are LG, different sizes. You can specify these in your config. I'm going to use one called LG, which stands for large screens. And now when I save that, I need to also put my modifiers on everything. And you'll see here now, I'm on a small screen. It's simply going the flex row. And then as soon as I get to a large screen, it goes to the flex column. And now it actually completely changes based upon the dimensions of the screen, allowing me to have these dynamic breakpoints. And these breakpoints, they do actually work on iOS as well. Probably, I don't think my phone changing that is going to work quite well. Trying this on the fly, I should have tried this beforehand of actually getting an iPad demo as well, because you still need breakpoints on native. And this is a really common misconception that people are having, that if you were a React Native developer 5 years ago, the design philosophy was you have one iPhone, a couple of Android phones that you're targeting, but they're all about the same sort of size. And you can just detect what phone they're using and design for that one device. And that worked really well. But now, there's a lot of iOS devices. You've got phones, tablets, watches, VR headsets. Like, what is the screen dimension of your application running in VR where a user can grab it and resize it? And what we're finding is that native apps are actually becoming just like web apps, where we need to have all these breakpoints set because now users can customize it. And on Android, it's even more extreme because you have things like Chromebooks, which are running Android. So your native Android apps are running on a widescreen monitor or being used just like a desktop application. And we're not even getting into things like Apple TV or React Native Mac or React Native Windows, because they're obviously just like the web browsers that can be resized as well. How does you want your app to look perfectly the same as it was on a smart fridge screen or on someone's ultra wide television? You just want to write the same code and have styling adjust. And so that's why we need this new concept of breakpoints coming to React Native. Like, the ecosystem has changed since React Native started. It's not going to be long now until you go to a React Native meetup and you got to find a developer who's never touched iOS before, which I think is crazy. But like, Amazon just announced that all their new Internet of Things devices are running React Native. So we're going to have this whole influx of React Native developers who never touch mobile. And are we ready for that crowd? Like, do we have the styling solutions? And so that's kind of what this is kind of aimed for. It's, can we prepare ourselves for this multi-platform vision that React Native has?
So if we have everybody coming in and thinking about these are big screens, these are wide screens, these are vertical
Yep,
screens, as opposed to like you have to think about this is an Amazon screen, this is a Samsung smart fridge screen,
exactly.
that kind of thing.
And what's funny is the web actually used to be like React Native was. I used to be a web developer 10 years ago. And back then, we used to use detection to say, okay, this is this device. Like we actually used to detect if you're on a desktop or an iPhone. And we'd be able to style a website for the model iPhone just because there were so few devices back then. But now, as the web gets bigger and bigger, they had to drop that philosophy. They had to move into what they call responsive design. And now React Native is
Mhm.
slowly catching up, where we've got so many devices now as well that we can't be designing per device. We've got to be thinking about this a little bit more.
One cool little thing I just like I had known there was selectors, but I did not know until you showed it on the screen that you could stack them like that. Web large. I've
Ah,
seen
yes.
like mobile small. Is there like an iOS Android selector in there?
Yep, there's iOS, Android, Mac OS X, Windows, Apple
Hey,
TV as well.
yeah.
You can also just say native if you want to target just all the native devices and not the web as well, which can be pretty popular because often web will be using sort of different components. And yeah, so
Oh,
this is the power of what you can be is this is the statefulness of styling that I said gets complex quickly when you need to
yeah.
stack these kind of conditions on top of each other. Like just doing an if statement saying like, apply this style if the screen size is this or that is really easy to do. That's really simple. But when you start adding these on top of each other, the amount of variance and variations that you can have just kind of balloons out, and you spend more time in your code dealing with styling logic than with business logic, which is crazy. It's nothing you should never have to deal with styling logic. That's you're not making an app for that. You want to just be able to get out your MVP, build your focus on the thing that you actually set out to do. Yeah, but these modifiers, they're actually pretty powerful. And let's do a couple of more examples of some
Real
fun
quick while you're
things.
on the modifiers, one burning question in
Yep.
my mind is like sometimes there's like components or even imperative functions that don't really play well with styling. I assume
Hmm.
number one, I assume that that large selector corresponds to a particular set of pixels. It's probably customizable, but default's probably pretty good already. Like, can I access that value outside of class name so I could use that in some kind of imperative code, like to access that pixel size in case I have to do something weird with some component that doesn't support NativeWind classes?
Yeah, so maybe this is a good time to go into the Tailwind config.
Ooh.
So the Tailwind config is where this theme gets declared. So let me just put these kind of side by side a little bit. So every single class name, every single modifier that you do, all comes. Oh, where was that file with the modifiers? Here, all comes from the Tailwind config. So essentially, Tailwind has a base config, a base theme that it would like you to use, and you can extend it, or you can remove it, or you can customize it to kind of change how it works. And so you see here it says theme extend. This allows me to then add on, or I could just use like outside, and I can then override what things are. And so this is where you can identify what like basically these keywords or atomics that they're also called, where you can say, okay, let's extend the font sizes and let's add something that is like my brand and actually just give that a size of 16 pixels. And now I can access this as a keyword inside my class names, where I could do like text brand. And see, you can see that my editor has actually picked up from my Tailwind config. I've added that to my theme. So now my IntelliSense has picked that up and says, yes, you now have this new style called text brand that says the font size as 16 pixels. And you could do that with all this customization. So you can change the spacing, which changes the media query. So you can see here, if you mouse over these classes, it actually tells you what this class would compile to as CSS.
Oh,
So if I wanted to add a custom size, like maybe there is a certain device where you want a keyword saying like, iPad 5th generation or something like that, you can actually create these keywords and then actually set what this media query would be for your app and then use those words inside there. So it's very easy to do, and even better, like the turnaround time is very quick. You just write there and it just works here. The iteration speed of development here is really quick and very handy. So you could just change these and add them as you want, and it's huge what you can customize because everything from Tailwind is based upon here. So all your properties are listed inside here. You can create all of them and go from there as well. And so
I didn't know about that hover thing that you can see the actual CSS style. That's so cool.
yeah, so that's the VS Code extension that gives you that, and that's very useful for understanding. Because sometimes, like, you'll be surprised. I'm only using like 2 modifiers here, but it's not unusual to have like up to 5 or 6 modifiers on a certain class, just because sometimes styling just gets that complex, and it's easy. It's good to be able to just hover over it and get this like sort of CSS representation of it, so you can see all the different conditionals that it could be.
Which VS Code is that? Is that like the Tailwind VS Code
Yes.
extension? Or is that like a NativeWind specific one?
So this is just the Tailwind
Okay.
IntelliSense plugin. So if you
Neat.
just install Tailwind CSS IntelliSense, it just works out of the box, and it will read from your config and bring it across. It because NativeWind is simply just a preset inside Tailwind. You get all the extra like we add things to Tailwind because obviously we're dealing with React Native now. So there's some extra styles, some extra classes, and this just gets picked up automatically and will just work for you.
Cool. So I don't mean to break your flow because you're definitely cooking here, but
Yeah.
I want to get to a few questions here in the middle.
All right.
A burning one
from
Matt. But we got a few questions in the chat about performance. So Matt L is asking, how much performance loss do we get when using NativeWind, or do we? I mean, I guess we should ask, do we get performance loss when using NativeWind versus default style sheets?
Well, so the question is, what are you doing with your default style sheets? Because if you're simply just saying, okay, let's do like text red, put a style on, go from there, the performance is going to be pretty comparable. It's more when you start getting into these modifiers, you still start to question because now you're not just using default style sheets. You have to write this logic yourself, all of these conditionals. What sort of design system are you coming up with that can handle all this sort of like conditional logic? And we'll get into these. I'm still just like cooking with like the most basic styles. Like these can get very complex, very crazy very soon. And that's where we start to see that the performance really starts to shine, that NativeWind is optimized for these complex styles. And that's where it's going to probably outperform what sort of system you do. It's kind of like that saying of, you could do it yourself or you could just get an expert because this is their problem that they're solving. Their focus on making your styles work as best as possible. And so like that's what NativeWind is. But if you're simply not using these modifiers, the performance is going to be pretty comparable. The biggest difference, and maybe I'll jump into that before I go into this demo, is I can kind of talk about how this works. And we're just simply wrapping your components and applying the style sheet objects. So the only performance loss is, instead of doing like you would say a text component, we simply just wrap that into like a styled text. So there's just one more element added to the render tree that takes in this class name and swaps that out for your actual styles. And so that's like, where the performance loss is that there's just one more thing inside there, but it's such a minor loss. And we find that with people with complex styles that it actually ends up being faster for some of the situations.
Yeah, when you mentioned the state that was assumed by NativeWind, I was immediately thinking like the more things I write where I set my own state and consume that, the more likely I am to end up with like extra render cycles or things rendering twice when I only intended to render once, just because of I might just write it and kind of forget about it and not really optimize it.
I might just quickly show like this little thing that I cooked up some little notes. They kind of explain a little bit about how NativeWind works. So people can see this properly. So basically, when you're doing your styling, like you write just like your normal JSX, and then Babel or whatever tool you're using comes along and actually compiles that out to JSX. what we're doing is whenever something has a class name on it, we generate a styled version of your text. And instead of rendering out, see, if you notice here, you specified text, but we'll swap that out with this styled text. And we just render out a different component instead that can take in this class name, but it still calls the text component under the hood. We're not changing how React Native works. We can't break React Native. Like it has to work in a certain way, but we can augment, we can add an extra layer to it that can do this style processing. So that's all it's kind of doing under the hood.
I think this might answer, to some extent, Bay's question. NativeWind feels like a familiar and comfortable way to style on mobile, but feels like a cheat or a hack. I mean, it seems like it actually is pretty it's kind of doing a normal thing that maybe some of us would have tried to do on our own when we got overwhelmed with the complexity of our styles.
Yeah, and what's crazy is so this seems like this might seem different to us, but if I wrote code let me get a code block. Wait, let me move this somewhere better. Let's go on a clear screen. If I had something like a function my text and just wrote it out, and then I would say export const styled my text, and you probably have styled my text. You'd import styled from some sort of library that you're using. This seems quite familiar because this is how a lot of things work in the React Native ecosystem. But what I don't like about this is very verbose. It kind of feels heavy-handed. Every time you go to write a component, you have to be like, okay, I'm not actually rendering out my component. I have to do the styled version of it. The UX of this approach, while very familiar, is very heavy-handed. What I love about the web is that, and probably one of the reasons why the web has taken off so much as a platform, is it's so quick, it's so easy. You don't have to worry about this. Like if I want to style something, I just write div with a class name on it, and I'm good to go. Like I don't have to worry about, is this a style div? Like, can this div do this? Can this div do that? Does it have these functionalities? I just say text red 500, and I have this element that has red text. And so part of NativeWind isn't just can we solve styling, but can we reduce the barrier to entry? Can we get people to iterate quickly and not have to worry about all of this? And so, yeah, it feels like a cheat sheet, but it's just a UX wrapper around what we already do to make it feel easy, feel quick and easy, so you don't have to worry about all this.
Nice. And I'll let you get back wherever you're going, but one more question because it feels very germane to what we just went through. Mahu is asking, can you mix NativeWind and styles? Which has higher priority?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the core design philosophies around NativeWind is don't break the ecosystem. I didn't make something that was incompatible with everything else out there. And this has caused me so many headaches. But I think it's kind of one of the powerful things about NativeWind is that it's more of an opt-in system than an opt-out system. So when you put a class name on something, that's you opting in. But I've purposely put a style here in between all these class names to show that you can still use class style here, and you can also still put styles on these elements. Because I can't change how React Native works. The best is for me to come into this ecosystem adding something new, but I don't want to prevent you from doing what you already do. And so many systems are based upon this style prop that we have to treat it as a first-class citizen. So yes, you can actually mix the two together. The priority system for this is it actually follows the CSS specification. So this means in CSS, when you write a file, you'll say something like text red 500. And this rule actually has a certain weight behind it. Like it's actually a score that's like a series of numbers that says like in what order should this style be applied. When you do an inline style, this also has a weight, but this weight, I see my Vim skills are failing me. This weight, this has actually got a higher number in terms of order, which means the inline styles overwrite the class name styles, and we see that with the web. But that's not all. You don't always want that case. Sometimes you want to do something like the always popular important modifier. And the important modifier changes this from being the highest type of styling that you can do so much that it's actually going to override whatever is specified inside here. So NativeWind actually sorts out these styles for you to give you this sort of flexibility. Like, do you want the styles to go underneath the style tag? Do you want them to be merged in with it? Or do you want them to override the style tag? You get to choose based upon what styles you want to do. And to actually go between those two, all what you need to do is put an exclamation mark at the front of your class. So this is a special modifier that says, I want to override the style tag. I don't want to be inserted with inside of it. And that gives you the flexibility to choose, what sort of order you want it to be in.
Huh. Today I learned. This took me back to a conversation. I was side channeling with Mark a little bit earlier in the year as I was trying to learn Tail or NativeWind so I could stick it into a demo workshop I was doing. And Mark just mentioned is like, it's okay sometimes if you got to use style. Like sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. Don't worry about it being pure NativeWind. The goal here is to make a good app.
Yeah, and I think this comes a lot from my web background as well. Like in the web, they're not all CSS. Like people still use inline styles. People mix and match style libraries all the time. It's very common to come into a project and find that they're using 3 different style libraries because each library has a purpose, right? Like this isn't we're using this. These are tools that they have because in certain scenarios, each tool is better than another tool. And because they were purpose built for that scenario. And so you should always whenever you have a problem with NativeWind, think about is this really the best tool for what I'm trying to do? Maybe there's something else that I could do. And maybe this is a really good segue to something that NativeWind can't do as well as a style sheet and how it kind of works around and has different sort of advantages. So these class names, they're strings, but these strings get compiled into styles. And so this means that these styles actually need to be static. They can't change. I can't do something like this because this is no longer a static string. This class could be anything and the compiler doesn't know what it is. So it simply skips over it. It's like, okay, cool. I have no clue. We won't consider this as a class name. Well, compare it if I did this with an inline style, you see it's very easy for inline styles to be dynamic and allow you to change things on a per component basis. So this is probably the most common scenario on both the web and in React Native of when you would choose not to use NativeWind, just because it's not great for these small dynamic styles. That being said, though, I think I'm going to move on to another cool feature of you can do dynamic styles with NativeWind. It just brings in a new concept to native before that hasn't been shown. And that is CSS variables and the ability to use these custom design tokens inside your application. So CSS variables, also known as CSS custom properties, but no one really calls them that. They've kind of taken the web by storm because it allows you not to do inline styles, to actually specify, okay, I want some of my design tokens. Yes, I want them inside my Tailwind config because I want them to compile in a certain way. But sometimes you need some runtime values. A good example of this is if a user can pick a theme color for their application, and when they change that color, you want the entire branding of your application to change. You can't compile for that. That's a runtime selection. So how do you get that into your static styles? Well, the easiest way to do that is by specifying a variable and passing that down into your code. All right, so let's maybe go back to our friend here with the selection link. And let's just say he's color red 500. But we don't always want him to be that color. Maybe we can specify that he could be a brand color now. And now that's saying that this value is dynamic. It's going to be whatever the value of this brand color is. So now we need to pass this brand color, a runtime value, into your application. And so what we can do is up here, we can say const, I don't know, something like theme. And we can say our brand color is, let's just say blue. And our section link is rendered here. So we need to say somewhere higher up because it needs to be inside a parent. And what we can say is on the style for this component, it's going to have these variables, which are var. So this is an import that comes from React Native. And I've screwed up my editor here, the styling here. Oh, sorry, vars. Import the right thing. And so it's now saying, I want to pass this object as CSS variables down to my styles. And you can actually see it's already done the styling on the side here. This text is already blue. It's picked up these values. And this then creates like this hierarchy of design tokens that you can change at runtime. So I can simply change this from blue to green. And now these values actually change as well. And this is what allows you to have that sort of dynamicness. And this is where NativeWind can actually be more powerful than inline styles, because maybe you just want to have this top level theme for your application that can be changed, and you want all the components in your app to re-render when these variables change. You can do that with inline styles, but you'd have to go into every single component and make sure that they're listening to the correct hooks, to the correct providers, instead of just saying, okay, cool, I'm going to put this text brand color here, and it's just going to pull off that value for this. And then again, you can do your modifiers on this. And maybe we only want to have the green text when we're hovering, or with all the other conditionals. And this is where, again, we're getting into modifiers being super powered and like completely powering up your application. And so this is a new concept that NativeWind brings to React Native of, well, we've always kind of had this like a theme provider, but you've had to use it like a React context and have to like write the code that like says use context, pull in these values. This just allows you to do it via strings, which makes it incredibly easy. The other way, cool. Yeah, the other way that you can kind of do dynamic styles, which is quite interesting, is you may not have like kind of had this realization at first, but this is just a string. And I said that all the strings kind of have to be statically analyzed, but they don't have to be one complete string. It's just that the class names can't be broken, but the string itself could be. So I could actually do like const text color class name and have this as a conditional. So I could do something like props dot, I don't know, if it has a props.test ID, then let's use this brand color. Otherwise, let's do like text red 500. And instead of just passing this through as a single string, I can then actually compose these together. And see, everything's what went to red because there's no test ID on any of these. If I was one of these upcoming movies, and as soon as I put this class on it, now just that one is this certain color, and it's actually that dynamic style. This works because all the strings in your application get analyzed for the styles. So these are still being compiled. they don't have to be on the class name prop. You can actually just treat them as normal strings and compose them together in a complex manner. And this allows you to then start having even more control over your styling. This is where you can get into like collections of styles or different sort of variants. And this is where the Tailwind ecosystem like really shines, because there's many libraries out there that actually handle this logic for you. So some of the popular ones are things like class name authority, or like Tailwind variants is another one. And this allows you to bring in concepts that extend Tailwind past being atomic styles. Like, so maybe what you want to do is bring in this concept of like slots into your application, where you want to have styles for different slots. And you can say, okay, this is like the base, this is the avatar, this is the wrapper. And you simply just use these libraries and they just work with React Native or with NativeWind, because it's just a string. There's nothing special. It's not a special object. It's not doing anything special. As long as that class name is passed in a string and that string has the complete styles on it, this all works. All of this customization works. And this allows you to take NativeWind to whatever extreme you want it to be with the sort of customization that it could be.
Cool. So I think
And
this might answer Albert's question. Can you use the ternary operator? It sounds like you can swap out, as long as you're swapping out entire string or styles in there, or class names.
As long as you keep the class name intact and you don't break up a class name, it will work. There are ways, if you look into the Tailwind docs and ecosystems, to allow this. You can like whitelist certain ways. So there are certain ways, like if you are pulling in components from like a remote location, or you're using like markdown components or things like that might not be able to, there's still workarounds for it. But these are more the exceptions. Like you basically just want to be using your ternaries, your if statements, any sort of logic that are happening here. But even then, like you want to just be using the existing libraries out there. Like Tailwind is massive in terms of its user base. It has so many people use it, so many battle tested libraries, that you just find one of the variant libraries that works for you, that kind of fits your mental philosophy, because they're all great. You just got to kind of fit the one that like meshes well with you and use that, and you'll be fine. You don't have to come up with your own sort of like ternary logic. It's best just to pick one of these and give you more features than you ever need.
Nice. So looking at like the theme variables, like that sounds like it'd be adjacent to like light dark mode, which is kind of a variable.
Yep.
But I'm recalling there's maybe some built-in faculties for that already.
Correct. Yeah. Well, light and dark mode is, an intrinsic part of application development these days. We used to be able to get away with only doing one or picking one, but we care more about accessibility now and user preferences. So we basically go off the device settings. So we can kind of change this around. Let's maybe just undo this. I want to do some different examples of how I can do light and dark mode. Let's maybe go back to our layout. Yeah. And so let's just say we could do a background of like red 500. And suddenly our application has a giant big red background. Now let's just imagine that this is like dark mode. And so we only want to show our this style when it's in dark. And when I apply that style, you see that my web browser is now red, but my iOS application is now not. That's because I'm using dark mode on my computer. And so my browser is picking up, yes, you're in dark mode. But the iOS simulator by default is in light mode. You actually have to use a toggle on it for it to switch to dark mode. So I'm just toggling light and dark mode within the simulator. And as soon as I do that, the dark mode style gets applied. And that's because this is coming from these modifiers. Like we're hooking into all of this for you. And so you can set up these custom classes and custom things to say, I want this to be light, I want to be to dark. And again, these have all the modifiers, all the sort of styles that you can kind of wish for. The dark mode is just another modifier that you can apply inside your application. But we can also like take this a little bit further. Like not only can you make anything now respond to light and dark mode without having to do the hooks, you can also go and like, okay, let's maybe put an active style on. I have a slight fast refresh bug on the iOS there with these new tabs. But okay, so let's just make this active on this tabs things. This tabs, it's a view. Like it's not oppressible. It doesn't actually have a way to have like an on press handle on it. But you see here of web, it still works because web doesn't have a different, it doesn't care if something is a div or oppressible. Everything can have these handlers. And so I kind of wanted to bring this sort of like logic into React Native as well, saying like, let's just say if you have a view and you put a style on it that requires oppressible, let's just make that view oppressible instead, because we know what you meant to do. You said, maybe you don't actually have control over the component. Maybe this is like a third-party component that you're importing in and you want these active styles. So let's just say if this is active, let's just put this active style on it. And so now, once that's finished refreshing, I can now click on this and it actually has this active sort of styling on it.
Like party mode.
So, yeah, party mode. I probably shouldn't have done that on the stream. So I'll do it a little bit slower next time. But this, you could take this a little bit further because like, so now I've got components that can react to light and dark mode, even if they don't have the hooks there. I can have components that can react to like pressable things, even if they're not pressables. Like, how far can we take this? Really? Like, that's the big question, right? So what if I take this a little bit further and say, okay, let's just say the background is always red. But let's actually add a transition of colors on it. And I might just add a duration as well because we're live streaming and transitions are very quick. All right. I'm just going to refresh the application just because NativeWind requires if something is going to have a transition on it, it has to have transition on the first render. And for people unaware of what a transition is, it means that when a style goes from one style to another style, it should animate. And you can see now that I'm going from red to blue to green. And it's no longer, like if I took this off, take away the transition, hopefully this comes across on the stream properly. Like they just switch automatically because that's what happens when you switch styles.
I saw it. That was awesome.
But if I put a transition on it, now when I switch styles, it actually takes 3 seconds for those colors and it actually animates from one color to another color. That's because like NativeWind can actually take your styling even to the next level and says, okay, you've actually told us now that you want this to be animatable, this view. So instead of just making this view oppressible, we're also going to make it an animated pressable for you to allow you to have the customization. And so now you also don't even have to worry about reanimated in all the other animated styling boilerplate. You can just say there's one class and say, okay, cool. Whenever the color change, animate for me. And NativeWind actually handles all that complex logic. And maybe you actually only just want to do this on like active. So let's just go from like BG red. Like this all works brilliantly with these modifiers so that now when I click on it, it changes. I'll just refresh this. And see, it's working on iOS as well. And you see, okay, I'm going to click on this a little bit, and then I'm going to release halfway. This isn't like a constant animation. Like I'm now pulsing that by pressing up and down on my mouse. Like this is actually properly responding to my input and transitioning from one to the other, back to the other. And so, yeah, we can take full control of those sort of animations with your sort of transitions. And there's a whole bunch of properties that you can transition. Like some of the best ones are colors, obviously, but opacity is like very good, very useful as well. Especially, we used to have like touchable opacity in React Native. That's been deprecated in favor of pressable. So how do you quickly get back that behavior of touchable opacity, right? Like I love just having this component that whenever someone pressed on it, it just went transparent a little bit. It was such a time saver. But then going to pressable, I now need to implement that logic myself. it's so good just to be able to say, okay, this has a touchable opacity of a value here, and then I can just apply the opacity class myself and just say, okay, cool, on press, go to opacity 50. And in a couple of lines of code, I've brought back the functionality of the touchable opacity on anything, like not just pressables, on views, on text, on third-party components. Like I could do, like you can see here, this safe area view is not even from my package. I'm putting a class name on something else that's coming from somewhere else. And so, yeah, this is another layer of the depth of NativeWind and how much time it can speed up with your applications, because now you don't have to worry about this. But
that was cool. We went from like party, it was just a few lines, like party mode, not even a few lines, just a few text blocks from like party mode to more like chill, like lounge, lava lamp mode.
Yeah. And see, this is like, I keep at the start, I was saying that the power of Tailwind is the iteration speed, the ability to be basically like just working with these strings and be able to think, I want to do this, and just write it down and have it applied, and not having to worry about formatting, having to like the punctuation, the syntax, the styling, are you importing in the correct things from the correct places? All that kind of goes away. You're not naming things, you just write what you want. And so it can kind of look a bit like, oh, I have this huge string at the start. Like everyone who starts using Tailwind at the start is like, everything has these giant strings on it. How do I deal with this mess? But then when you actually get into like the coding flow, you actually realize how powerful these strings are, because you can quickly iterate, change things around, search for where things are. They don't block your mental flow, which is like, to me, the biggest advantage of Tailwind. This is why I love it and like to use it over other sort of like libraries.
Awesome. Going back to the light dark mode real quick, Racket had a good question. How do you control dark light mode manually? So I'm thinking about like, maybe an app defaults to, you base it on the operating system, but maybe they have an override if in case you want to have like that one app use dark mode and when the rest of your phone is light mode, or vice versa.
Yeah, so NativeWind actually exposes a hook called use color scheme, which is very similar to the use color scheme hook from React Native. But on this, we actually give you like toggle color scheme. If you just want to actually see what the color scheme is, set color scheme, and yeah, toggle color scheme. When you set a color scheme here, this is telling it will change both the React Native color scheme as well. So this still calls React Native set color scheme, but it also forces all the modifiers that are light or dark to follow what it is. And you can also go back to the system settings just by doing like set color scheme system. And then that will return it back to the system settings. So you don't have to be forcing using light or dark mode. There's always that third option system, which is always important for those people who manually toggle that themselves on their device.
Awesome. So I know based on our list of things that there's probably like 16 more cool things you could show us, but unfortunately we have to start wrapping up the stream. So one question we did want to cover.
Can I show one last cool thing?
One more. I'll give you one more. One more.
Okay. All right. I'll do this really quick. Because we kind of talked about transitions and how they're cool to go from one thing to another. But a transition really is just a type of animation. And so if we could do transitions, like why can't we do full-fledged animations as well? And animations in Reanimated, they're possible, but they're a little bit verbose. You have to like find this sequence of keyframes and things like that. Well, compared to on the web, animations are really actually simple to do. And so if you have a look at like defining an, oh, I shouldn't have saved that. All right, well, I spoiled my demo of what it is. But okay, let's say if you wanted to find an animation on the web, like to define that whole animation of this thing spinning around, it's just a little bit of CSS. And you would basically say, I want to do these keyframes that spin and do this action. Or I want to do this animation that bounces, and here's the syntax for it, what it's going to do. And so you can actually just put these animations on your classes, and NativeWind handles all of that for you. Get the iOS one. And sorry, I'm running an older version of React Native on here. So for those that don't know, the latest version of React Native now allows you to do percentage values with your transforms, which is a much needed feature. But I'll go back to spinning. So you can do crazy things like spin your entire application. But really,
I know what my next app's going to do.
Yeah. But the most important part is actually this bit here, like how easy it is to define your keyframe animations for what you want to do. Well, let's do a different one, maybe like pulse. And so you can actually hook into this CSS. Because we're using Tailwind, Tailwind's based upon CSS, I can actually just open up my global CSS file that I have, and I've actually defined some styles in here. But I could also just define my own custom animation inside here as well, and call this like pulse 2 or something. And instead of going down to like 50% opacity, it actually goes all the way down to nothing. And now back inside my file, let's go. You can, it's a little bit screwed up the animation there, but you can see that it's trying to animate the two at the same time. And you can actually just define your animations via CSS. So instead of having to go into Reanimated and define all of the settings that you want to do, you can actually just put it into CSS and it's just going to animate inside there instead. The pulse to the animation is a little bit stuck on the previous one because it's still trying to transition between the colors and the opacity. So I got a little bit stuck there. And so this is the other last thing that NativeWind gets to benefit from is it actually works on Tailwind, and Tailwind's based upon CSS. So you don't have to define your styles using stylesheet.create. You can actually just jump into your CSS file and define your styles inside here as well. And they're still going to work inside your React Native application. Like all of this still gets compiled into native styles. So if you don't want to use Tailwind's theming system, if there's something in it that you just can't work out how to do, but you know how to write the CSS, you can actually just jump into your style sheet, define the styles there, and then they can be brought across and working in here. So yeah, the last two things I wanted to show, just like animations, possible, custom styles outside of Tailwind, completely possible as well. Like it's really open-ended, this styling system for your needs and adjustable for whatever you want to do.
Awesome. Yeah, that was worth the one extra thing. I enjoyed the spitty stuff.
Yeah, spinning the entire application. It's always fun. Yeah.
One last question as we're wrapping up here. We had a few folks asking about NativeWind v4. So I was wondering if you could just kind of summarize what's the big changes with v2 to v4 and just kind of how that's shaping up there. What's the landscape of the latest version?
Yeah, so v4, it's been a long time coming. So for a bit of history, there was a version 3 that people started to use. But as people started to use it, it kind of became obvious that the architectural changes between 2 and 3 were just not a good idea. It kind of broke too many things, and that we had to go back to scratch and kind of think about how we change things. For v4, this is the v4 adds the CSS variables. It adds the animations, it adds the transitions, the custom styling. Basically, the scope of the project exploded and became very huge, and I probably took on a little bit more than I expected to take on. And so the testing and making sure everything works properly, it's been a huge task. But I believe we are actually scheduled for release either going to be early next week or the week after. I think the last of our testers are saying everything's good to go, and so that release is going to become the latest stable release very, very, very soon. This has been a lot of help. So I now have a new maintainer on the project, Dan, who's helping me with the community. That's only Dan's on Twitter. He's helping a lot, jumping into the Discord, fetching all the feedback for the testing, and just kind of helping me coordinate things. I kind of got overwhelmed by the community support for this project and how many people used it and started giving me feedback at once. I'm only one person. It was very hard to kind of make sure that I'm hitting everything. And so with his help, we're kind of coordinating this release, and the communication's been a lot more open. We've got a new Twitter account. You can go to the repo to see with the links there. We've got a new Discord channel. And if you want to find out more information, you can kind of go there and learn more about it. We'll put them.
I think Dan mentioned earlier in the chat too, you guys were doing some like streaming of live coding, working on NativeWind.
Yep. Let me actually switch back so people can see me. Yeah, so I've also been live streaming part of it. So, we want to try and get some more contributors onto the project and to people like to help build this out. It's always just been like me. There's a lot of bus factor. People are building their production apps on this, and it's always a bit of a risk if there's just one maintainer. So we want to get more people involved in the project. And so a part of it has been that a lot of other styling component libraries have also started to move their styling across to NativeWind as well. So I see Dan has mentioned like GlueStack. They used to have their own styling solution. They're now moving to NativeWind to use it instead. So we're going to we're building out the documentation and the information so that they can kind of help us out with the maintaining of the library as well. Part of that is, just streaming it. We're building up to contributing, showing people how this all works under the hood. Like, how do we manage all this complexity? Because it's actually a surprisingly small code base overall, and that what it runs, you've just got to get in the right mindset and understand the concepts of what it's doing, because we're doing things in a space that people aren't very familiar with, like customizing JSX, overriding components, compiling CSS. These are very niche skill sets that, we're working on docs to help people upskill so they can join the project more.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a great demo. Thanks for so much for showing us around. Got me excited too. I've been a little bit in and out of NativeWind over time. It got me excited enough that I got a little distracted during the chat, and I was looking up to confirm that my hair color is now BG Pink 800 or thereabouts.
Yep.
So you can go to learn more about NativeWind at nativewind.dev. We already plugged in the Discord and Twitter there, or X, whatever we call it now. This, of course, is part of our live stream series on React Native styling options. And next week, we've got Nate from Tamagui to tell us all about Tamagui. So thanks, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate your time and effort and showing us around and showing us all these things, neat things that are possible. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on the live stream, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, it's been great to hear. Thanks for the questions, everyone.